In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you some of the lessons learned over the past month about developing Payper PDF with my framework, SaaSCore.net. The real goal out of this and the sort of main mentality behind it is, can SaaSCore.net actually support a real multi-tenant credit-based SaaS without cheating? So obviously a big part of this was we went into this without any authentication in place. So that was always going to be part that took quite a while during this challenge of actually providing authentication. I went with Magic Link. The reason for that is probably the most basic and simple thing to get up and running when you've only got a few weeks to make an app in. Part of that, we also had to facilitate email sending, and I've said it before, but the people at Resend gave me access to their pro version whilst making these applications this year. So there's a few things that I've learned over using that as well, because this is the most I've used Resend in an application in terms of all their features with broadcasts and all that sort of stuff, and templating. Then there were a few quirks within the .NET SDK for sure on that, so I'm going to go over those as well. Also going to look at the credits-based billing and how I've modeled that, and whether I want to bring that actually into SaaSCore.net or whether I just want to have that as a you do your own thing later. You build your own credits-based system later, but SaaSCore.net can facilitate that. I think that from me, ethically, I think a credits-based system is like just a better approach than charging people that may not be like using their SaaS products, as much as the monthly subscription fee costs, if that makes sense. They're not getting much value out of it, whereas they can sort of top up as they go along. And it's like, I don't know, I'd like to get people's opinions on that, whether they actually agree or any counterpoints. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight into the Resend and how I've as an email provider, and how I've created or defined this as a domain capability within SaaSCore.net. First abstraction that I'd like to go through is the email provider. So obviously we've got Resend at the moment, but there could also be Twilio in the future or other providers. That I've got a couple of methods. One's just to send async, and this is what I had initially developed when everyone saw the sort of non-templated here's a magic link link. So that then got translated into the send template when I started making templates within Resend. And so I've made a couple of sort of domain sort of abstractions of what an email envelope is. So you've got an email address, email recipients, email content, and email address for the reply to. So the reason that I've done this as a sort of domain abstraction is that we're not tied into any one way of, so like Resend has an email address, right? Okay, and a mail message, I think it is. We'll see in a second. And if you expose something like that in an abstractions package, you're tying everything to that one thing. So just sort of abstracting it out, make it agnostic, and then we can use that as the sort of baseline for all of our abstractions. So if we go to the email provider, and we can go into the implementation for send template. So here is where I had some issues with the Resend and how that works. So first things first is we've got this email message, their type is, but we got email message template. So that requires a template ID. I've done that via options at the moment, app settings, and I'll show you the registration for that in a second. And then you assign the template and a list of variables to that. And then the email message will use that template to, from, and subject. So this is something that I sort of had some issues with. As part of the Resend template, you can actually specify a templated subject. But if you don't include the subject in the request, it blows up and says there's no subject. So then you go, okay, well, we'll provide the request subject, and then it just overwrites what the template is. So I think that just needs to look at from their side in terms of how that's working. So like if it's provided, use that. If it's not, don't. Just how I'm thinking about it. So that was the real crux of it. And then if we had any other email provider, you would just implement this interface, and then you've got just a send async and then a send template. And for the resend one, there's a little bit of validation here. I might pull that up into an actual validator for the particular types of requests. I don't know if I want to do that or not, simply for the fact if I start adding in packages just for the sake of adding in packages, I'm talking about like fluent validation here. It's just going to like blow up a framework, with all these dependencies, and it's like I'd rather keep things more basic, at least in the short term. And yeah, so that's the Resend provider. I'm just going to go switch into the IOC of this, the sort of dependency and registration for it, and we'll go through that. So this is the dependency injection method that you would be using for your in your iService collection. So this one requires resend options, so that's specific to Resend. Obviously, other providers in the future would have their own, and you can, if you wanted to create your own one that I've not developed in the meantime, using these, the email provider, then you can do that by just creating an extension method on the SaaSCore notification builder, or just registering directly in dependency injection yourself. Okay, so basically a bunch of options to configure. We're making them non-nullable. You have to provide us options, because otherwise this doesn't work. We need at least an API key. And this is just basic DI, and we've got the resend client and then registering an email provider. That's how lightweight this module is at the moment, the notifications module, because that's actually, I haven't actually touched on that, sorry. The notifications module is going to be dealing with emailing, SMS, push notifications. If I go through mobile, supporting mobile backends, let's actually go see how that looks in Payper PDF's DI registration. So here it is. We've got the add SaaSCore notifications, and then we're using resend, and we're just binding a section as the options. Very simple. Basically no work. So the whole thing with SaaSCore is just binding options effectively. That's what I wanted it to be like. Now that we're here, we may as well go straight onto the Auth, because you may have seen it, we've got it down here. So that was providing the emailing capabilities to be able to send Magic Link emails as part of the Magic Link Auth. So I've got the use Magic Links. Again, that's just another section. We'll go into the IOC of that when we look into the actual code for that. And I've added in cookie sessions as well. Obviously here I've just hard coded these, but these probably come in from the app settings as well. So let's go over to the Magic Links implementation, and we'll go start from there. This is a real critical bit on what happened where I was feeling a bit clunky with interfacing with SaaSCore.net's IOC, and I think this really highlighted I need to rethink this a bit, and it's more just about like where I'm registering certain dependencies and how I'm registering them, because if you can see here, we've got the add SaaSCore auth, so that's all the services, but then we've got use SaaSCore auth, and this has to be put in a very specific place, which is where I'm thinking that I can make a better abstraction for the authentication flow. And how I was saying in yesterday's video, like Auth 0 does it, like upon login do this and log out do that, before and after sort of thing. So you can modify what happens and when, but then when you register it, it's just one registration, if that makes sense. So I'll show you the example in Payper PDF real quick, because otherwise that would get confusing, I think. This is what caused me some issues. This is the API registration for the authentication. I've singled them out, these three. Obviously, within .NET Framework, you have to, as part of the middleware, you have to do the authentication and then the authorization. But we could use certain bits of middleware in between that as part of the authorization process. And that's a really good point, because I've just noticed I've got the use SaaSCore tenancy here, and that would actually be better off living there, and I'll explain in a while, shortly about that. But because I hadn't actually implemented the CLI tool to create this out the back of, add all the registrations where they need to be for this middleware stuff, I'd forgotten to put this in. And then some learning that I got out of this is that, like, authentication errors aren't obviously, that aren't so obvious. They don't just blow up. They're quite subtle. So what I was finding is that certain requests would go through, even though to a certain point, and then blow up. Okay, I saw that both with the tenancy side of things and also the user ID. So we've got two concepts in SaaSCore.net: the iUser context and the iTenant context. So both of these are going to be pulled out through claims, okay, in separate ways. Not in separate ways, but at separate points, which is where I was thinking I could collate them later on. Authentication happens, and it was basically going straight through to authorization. So I was all logged in, and it seemed all happy because the cookie was working. I had some endpoints that I was like checking the claims. I'm like, I'm definitely logged in, but this isn't working. And it's solely because of this registration. Now, it might seem quite obvious, and it seems obvious to me now, but at the same time, when you're like sort of trying to debug and trying to make progress, it was quite difficult. And also, I put it in the wrong project. So I was in here, in the admin API, I'd used that middleware, and that's why it was so confusing to me, because I was like, oh, this is just, I've registered it, but it was in the wrong project, So silly mistake, but it was a definite, like, oh, okay, this could be a lot easier, I wanted to keep this stuff out, the use authentication, use authorization. I wanted to keep that out of SaaSCore.net specifically, so you can add in whatever you want in between that, which is where now I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can add in a convenience method. It doesn't have to be the only way of doing this, where then you can customize what executes between the two, in which order. Yeah, so sort of like an action between the two that just registers middleware between the two. That's going to simulate the authentication flow. So big learning there, and definitely matters, because the authorization might depend on the user ID. It might depend on the tenant ID, and that gets set in these two bits of middleware. So rethink that, going to strengthen that up, tighten it up, make it really obvious as to what we're doing, but there's a good learning point. Okay, go back to the magic link stuff. Okay, so this is the user context middleware, and very basic. We're just going to let it blow up if anything goes wrong, which is another lesson learned for later. But we got this initialize async. So you can see here we've got HTTP user context. So this could technically be implemented in various ways. So like a desktop, for instance, user context. So that could also impact this. So again, this is quite simple, just helper stuff here. We've got the principal. We've also got whether they're authenticated or not. The require user, this is something that I've added into this, and the tenant, require tenant and require user. The reason is that, okay, maybe some requests there is no user, okay, and we just need to let it go. And then within those flows, if they need a user ID, that will blow up. Yeah, but for some stuff, you just you don't know the user yet. So that's any public-facing endpoints that don't require a user. The credit packs thing is a perfect example of that. Anyone could get that. This still is middleware, but we just want it to go through. And as part of the request, it doesn't need the user ID. Nothing's going to blow up. So one thing that I need to clean up here is I'm going to create constants for these magic strings, because I've just done this quickly, get it done. But now, okay, we go back. We'll make our own SaaSCore auth constants, and where we're going to keep that consistent across the full authentication module. So that's a small job. We'll get it done. The user ID parsing part of the initialize. So again, we're trying to get the user ID out of the claims. If it exists, then it's a GUID, and it's a GUID, then we can return the user ID, or we can set the user ID. Sorry. But if not, then we have to resolve, and we can resolve that from the type of provider, the provider subject, and then the email and display name. So something in here is the provider subject will be, for Magic Link, I've just done it as a GUID. Okay, I'm thinking we might make it the user ID, but for stuff like Auth0, that you get an external ID. Yeah, so it's like Auth0 or underscore something. That would be the subject, because that's an external concern. For Magic Link, for in-house Magic Link, we're keeping it the same. We're in control of that, so we're just going to assign it GUID. That relates to a DB entity. And this is a key part here, is that we've got these user identities. So each user can have multiple identities, and that's just how they're logging in. Okay, so this is setting up the groundwork for the future. So adding more providers. Right now we've got Magic Link as a provider. Okay, and this is just going through and getting the identity based on those external identity. So one thing I wanted to just show overall in the Payper PDF side, because I've pretty much just spoken mostly about SaaSCore.net, is I found some real, not concerns, but like, I think I've not overcomplicated things, but for an app like Payper PDF, do I need these clean architecture layers? Probably not, you know? In fact, it's been kind of more of a hindrance for something like this. And in the CLI for SaaSCore.net, I do have the tap single. It's not implemented, but I think I'm going to spend some time on that, because I think for things like this, it's just overkill. It just made things really awkward. You know, I think I could have been quite pragmatic about some of these things, like the data. I started having to implement data stores, and I'm thinking I could have just used the DB context, you know, and like worried about that later. This is a small app. Refactoring should be part of an application, right? Okay, it's, if you need to scale it out, you can sort of, hey, minor refactoring. The logic's there. You just need to move it behind an abstraction, you know, sort of thing later. But for everything like this, it's been kind of hindering me. So I'm definitely going to rethink that. Definitely going to spend some time implementing just a single app API layer, and we can just use folder segregation. You know, like, oh, this folder, everything in this domain folder is what you would see within this project, and everything within the application folder is everything that you'd see within this one. So that's definitely what I'm going to look at. I'm also thinking about creating the SQL project as part of the CLI as well. Just, it wasn't too much effort to do this, but I'm thinking if people want to learn as well, then okay, we can get something up and running, you know, and you can you don't have to think about this. I want to use the SQL server. Maybe there's another option that you can say add DB project or SQL proj, something like that, you know, and then and then there you go. You've got that the actual everything you need to set up, and that works nicely with the CI/CD pipelines that are to come, because all of that can just be configured, and you've got an instantly deployable app from start to finish, without having to worry about EF core migrations or anything like that, which some people want to do, and you can do that. There's nothing stopping you doing that. It's just when it comes to a point of deploying it to production, it then becomes more of a concern. Just one extra thing that I want to talk about really from this lessons learned is the credits-based system. I'm thinking that I might pull that up into SaaSCore.net. I didn't really want to do it, but then the more I was doing this, I was like, I could control the issue that with the atomicity of creating a tenant and a tenant wallet. It was like, oh, this is a real pain in the butt to do it like this. And I need to address that as well, actually. Whereas if that were just in SaaSCore.net, maybe that could have been a lot easier to deal, or it would have been a lot easier to deal with. But at the same time, am I putting too much into the framework at that point? So I'm going to leave it out for now. I'm going to put like a pin in it, but I've definitely considered it. And if we go to the problem that I was thinking about yesterday when I made the video, like, oh, the tenant wallet has to be created at the point of a tenant being created for the atomicity of it. It really doesn't. I've just got it in my head that it has to be created at that point. But at the same time, when you try to get the wallet for the first time, if it doesn't exist, then you could create it, right? And that's like a domain invariant, right? If it doesn't exist, create it. And then in the schema, I've already created this unique index on tenant ID for the tenant credit wallets. So it's like, well, that's DB enforced, not code enforced. So therefore, that the DB will always be correct. Because I was thinking, oh, what about race conditions where you get this, two actions trying to compete at the same time? And I don't think that's really, it's definitely a concern, but I don't think it's going to stop that approach. In fact, I think that's probably cleaner, because let me just show you the code, which is now the sort of transactional. I might call it something else, something more atomic based, but it is a transaction nonetheless. It's just not a good. The more I think about it, it's just not a good approach. I'm not saying it doesn't deserve to be in there, because it works. It's a bit clunky. Okay, so this is the tenant credit create tenant command. So this is the onboarding process. So the first thing that we've got to do is enlist the wallet store, okay? And behind the scenes, that will register the DB connection. And then basically create the tenant. We have to add a new user to it as well, because obviously when you create a tenant, the user that's there has to be added as well. We've not got permissions or anything yet, but that's where you would define like owner, something like that. We add that, then we have to save it, but that's obviously part of a transaction, so it's not committed. And then we create the wallet out of that using that tenant ID. Sorry, the tenant ID. So, and then we commit it, and then we sort of roll back if it's just a bit confused there, and I have found a bug within how this is doing as well, how this is working currently, because there's no rollback here. So I was thinking, oh, when it tries and catches, it will roll back, and I've just realised there's no rollback. So I need to add that in to support this. But I'm thinking I'm just going to strip this out of how this is working, and just use the do it in two things: a get or create for the tenant wallet. I think that's cleaner. It's I think that's the best way of doing this. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work on that now. Just because this is just not, it's not something that I want to do. It just doesn't feel right. So I'm going to refactor that. I'm going to keep it in for now because it might have some sort of value elsewhere. But at the same time, in my thinking, it's like that doesn't really scale outside of a monolithic approach. It might get confusing. You also have to implement a certain interface into your store, and then it's probably going to be repeated logic. So I'm going to scrap that, and I'm going to go into the sort of more DB enforced unique, which I've already put in there. So just, reflection on what you've done. So those are some of the key learnings that I'd discovered out of this. Obviously, I think there's a whole host of other stuff that I'd messed up and hadn't thought about, but can't cover everything in this video. I'm going to make a list and keep track of that over time in better. Creating an app whilst building out a framework, especially in these early days where there's a lot of stuff is missing, it's a lot of work. I've fallen behind on some of the testing as well, so I need to get up to speed with that as well. Certainly a lot of things that you need to think about and weigh up as you're building a framework. Also, I've noticed about how I'm structuring SaaSCore.net, and I was keeping it that way for simplicity in the early days, but I think that I am going to start breaking them out into actual individual NuGet packages sooner rather than later, because otherwise I think I'm just going to incur a whole host of like technical debt as a part of that. So I will be putting things out. That also makes the sort of dependencies a lot cleaner, and I will definitely work on that. So if you liked what you've seen, you like the transparency of the issues that I've encountered, please like and follow. Also check out SaaSCore.net, sign up to the pre-release, that would be fantastic, and see you in the next one. Cheers.